It's terrific. It's a terrific mystery that I've managed to unravel. I really believe it was my love for Brunelleschi, my love for my city, Florence, and for this monument.
Florence, Italy. Crowds of tourists besiege the doors of its cathedral. Millions of people come from all over the world to stand beneath a Renaissance dome and marvel.
It was very important for each city to show its strength, its power, its wealth. And they were very keen to have something which everybody else would look at with awe and wonder how on earth it was ever constructed.
These are still dimensions that are big and serious for any engineering enterprise. I mean, any engineer today would still have to seriously think, how would he go up 50 meters in the air? That's a feat anyway.
The dome of the cathedral was built nearly 600 years ago. It was one of the first great works of the Renaissance. It's an engineering masterpiece, bigger than any dome built before and completely new in its design. It's one of the most studied buildings on the planet, but still no one knows quite how it was built.
An enormous building like this is quite difficult to analyse. You can't dissect it as though it were a corpse, because a lot of its structure is actually buried inside, and nobody's going to demolish the dome in order to discover how it was constructed, and so there are some things we'll probably never know.
Its builder, Filippo Brunelleschi, was a shadowy figure, so secretive that no one has been able to uncover the inventions that made his dome possible, until now. A local architect believes he's cracked one of the great secrets of the Renaissance.
I truly love this monument. From being a child, I've always loved it, because for a real Florentine, it's the symbol of our city. Coming to know the mystery in which it is shrouded, which resisted the investigations of Leonardo, Michelangelo, Zimmerlis, I've allowed myself to be seduced. I've now been studying it for 27 years.
Massimo has worked for decades on a solitary obsession. Now he thinks he's found the answer, and he's ready to prove it. In a Florence park, half a mile from the real thing, Massimo is building his own dome. It's an exact scale model of Brunelleschi's original, an experiment in Renaissance engineering. Massimo believes that this will finally reveal the inventions of the greatest architect of the Renaissance.
Brunelleschi can be described in a few words. He's one of the greatest geniuses that humanity's ever had. He's one of the greatest geniuses of all time. He can't simply be defined as an architect or an engineer or even an artist, because in all fields he has touched the principal apexes of art and technology. Defining Brunelleschi in the Renaissance seems very easy for me, because the truth is that Brunelleschi is the Renaissance.
When work on the dome began in 1420, Brunelleschi was virtually unknown. 16 years later, the dome was complete, and its architect was a superstar.
Brunelleschi's career as an architect was in a very real sense launched by his high-profile involvement in this project and consolidated by its success.
And this was a project which took up really the major part of his career as an architect, and it undoubtedly made him the most famous and celebrated architect in Italy.
To think like Brunelleschi, Massimo had to forget the 20th century and become an engineer of the Renaissance. Brunelleschi had never revealed his methods. Massimo had to reinvent them from scratch. Apart from Brunelleschi's buildings, the past has left few clues to follow.
I have indirectly walked the road trodden by the great maestro, who, unlike many illustrious men of the time, was a very reserved person. He himself has left us nothing, not even a signature.
In a Florence church, a side chapel is covered with Renaissance frescoes. The scenes tell the story of St. Peter. Among groups of identifiable 15th century celebrities, we have the only contemporary portrait of Brunelleschi. Who was he? Why was he so secretive? And how did he come to build the dome?
His family background were well-to-do, well-placed Florentine family, but although very bright, he wasn't particularly interested in book learning and went instead to learn the craft of goldsmithing. He came relatively late to architecture. He was 40 when he began his major involvement in the dome.
The story of the dome began nearly a century before Brunelleschi was born. In 1296, the medieval city of Florence began to build a new cathedral. It was intended to become the grandest Gothic building in Europe. Florence was becoming a power to be reckoned with, and it wanted all the world to know it.
The city had come from one of many important towns to be one of the biggest and most prosperous towns in Italy. There was a lot of money around.
The wealthy Florentine guilds spent huge amounts of money on buildings and works of art. Soon Florence would no longer be medieval. It would be pioneering a new age, the Renaissance. This would be the city of Leonardo and Donatello, Michelangelo and Botticelli. Painting, sculpture, architecture and literature were all being reinvented. Florence was at the heart of a revolution that was felt right across Europe. The Renaissance wasn't only a movement in art. It changed everything, from religion and politics to technology and engineering. Massimo was exploring Renaissance engineering in one way, but what about the original dome? What could the cathedral reveal about the building methods of the past? Timothy Verdon, once a professional art historian, is now a priest. He's canon of Florence Cathedral and has studied the ways in which Christianity expressed itself in a piece of monumental engineering.
The vast vaulted bays of the nave of the Florence Cathedral express not only their love of Gothic forms, but above all their capacity to manipulate the technology of Gothic construction to create, in this case, 18-meter square vaulted spaces larger than those in any other European Gothic cathedral. As they reach the end of the nave, however, their dream grew larger. What they imagined was a space that could compete with the greatest spaces the history of world architecture knew. A domed space that would be like the dome of heaven itself. A vast space beneath which the human being could feel at one and the same time the smallness of his proportional relationship to God, the Creator, and the greatness of his own capacity to recreate, in human terms, a heaven like God's own heaven.